to have you all here for another workshop. As said, today's workshops were focused on building TypeScript tooling, SDKs, and experiences on Ethereum. And for the first one, we got awkweb joining us here to talk about the tools they're building at Webm. So feel free to kick things off.
Well, yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. This is a little bit smaller group. Down, if anyone has any questions, I'll have the chat open on the side. So feel free to ask them. And yeah, down to like make this time useful for you all too. I have some slides and other stuff to talk about, but I think it's always interesting to hear what people are thinking about. So, all right, let's get into this. All right, so I got the screen up here. Yeah, like I said, got the chat over here, so feel free to drop anything, interrupt. So yeah, what I work on, what I do is mostly work on TypeScript tools for Ethereum, like lower level interfaces like VM, higher level interfaces like WAGMI, some other random small libraries in between, stuff like ABI type, which if you're not familiar with it, allows you to do some pretty wild type inference with ABIs, Ethereum ABIs. And yeah, really my focus is like making really good tools that, you know, Jake, who's my partner, who works at Webm with me, like that we like to use, that other people like to use, making sure stuff is performant, and keeping it simple. Usually when you keep it simple, you end up with like pretty good developer experience and things end up being pretty performant. Just like a side effect of things. And yeah, I'm awkweb on Twitter, TMM on GitHub. If you see me around, want to message me, you're welcome to. And yeah, our sort of our like landing page website with everything on is webm.dev. That links out to everywhere. So that's, yeah, a good spot to. So yeah, maybe you've seen these logos. This is what we work on the majority of our time, VM, WAGMI, and what are these things? Well, WAGMI is where we first started. It's like a React hooks library for Ethereum, like high level interface, which is good for building apps. So if you want to connect a wallet, sign a message, like do sign with Ethereum, send a transaction, yeah, just interact with contracts, fetch ENS information. WAGMI sort of contains everything that you need for that, and it's convenient that it hooks into React, which a lot of people use. It's also powered by like this package called WAGMI Core, which is just vanilla JS that you can use with any framework, Vue.js, Svelte, Solid, anything like that. And then yeah, another library that actually was launched almost a year ago is VM, just the lower level TypeScript interface for Ethereum, which allows you to which actually does like encoding, decoding, sending off JSON RPC requests. So WAGMI uses VM internally, which is kind of cool for open source. It's like we have like a high level package people use, we have a lower level package people use. We're like consumers of like our own libraries in that way. And then yeah, there's another library called ABI type, which is more like advanced TypeScript, which allows you to like infer TypeScript types from Ethereum APIs. Basically, it's like you're able to type check that like a function name that you're going to call in Ethereum API isn't misspelled, and then you're able to check whether or not the properties that get passed in to the function are the correct type. And yeah, do some other wild stuff too, like be able to like narrow the return type for functions based on like for overloads based on like how many arguments, like what arguments you passed in, stuff like that. And then more recently, a non-crypto related project is we released this Vox, which is like a documentation framework. We've been building docs for these other projects for a while and wanted something that was minimal and easy to use. And yeah, that's another one that we work on. So yeah, in terms of contributing to projects that are related to us, this is where we spend most of our time. And There is like some overlap between contributors that like we've seen pull requests from, but yeah, for the most part, each one of these have their own distinct, vibrant contributor base, which is nice. Yeah, what are we focused on now? And then maybe this leads into like where you all can jump in and help out if you're interested. Yeah, we just released major version 2 for VM and WAGMI, the culmination of a lot of work in both of those. And so as such, we're like really into making sure that those have a solid like rollout, and yeah, it's easy for people to use. Generally, we try to keep like our repositories pretty clean and tidy, with low issue numbers, low open pull requests, which we'll talk about a little bit later here. And yeah, just like I said, interested in trying to create seamless integrations across these tools, whether it's like VM working really well with WAGMI, whether it's like ABI type working well for VM, or for other downstream folks, there's like a few other libraries that build on top of these things. VM also like has a bunch of people building on top of it with like count abstraction, and yeah, a bunch of other use cases. And then lastly, like great documentation. That includes like, something like Vox, like making stuff like look and feel really good, but really just like making sure stuff is explained in as clear a way as possible. And I think this is just a continuous effort, just because, what makes sense to someone with a lot of experience might not make sense to someone with a small amount of experience, but you want to serve both audiences. So always just trying to improve that, which isn't really a coding thing. It's more just like writing and explaining concepts. So yeah, that's sort of what we're focused on now. And like how you could contribute is, GitHub has like these special links where if you like add /contribute to the end of like the repository URL, it sort of like pulls up. I guess WAGMI doesn't have any good. I don't actually know if either of them have any good. Okay, here's an example. Like, yeah, like it shows the good first issues, and then like the contributing guide, which both I think are super important. I think a lot of people know about good first issue. You can like filter for that, but at least for us, the contributing guide is like really important to get started with, just because like it goes through everything that you would need, like in a step-by-step tutorial, like creating a contribution. Even just like the basic stuff, like adding the repository, your local machine, setting things up, running tests, writing documentation, submitting a pull request, how that process goes, and versioning. So yeah, I'm not sure if a lot of people take like care in their contributing guide, but we really care about it a lot. And yeah, some general ideas how to get started. At least for our repositories, I feel like these generalize pretty well for other ones too, is that like I feel like everyone is always looking to improve their documentation. And everyone that comes, let me just make sure the chat's open here. Everyone that is interested in contributing the project is welcome to try to make it better. And it's usually a really valuable thing too, because often if you are looking at something, like you're reading the doc and you feel like something isn't explained clearly, or you have a question, it's likely someone else has that too. And so by trying to make things better, it's like you get to contribute, and likely it's like you helped out a bunch of folks that probably had the same question, that were, didn't have the time, were too afraid to contribute, didn't know how. And so it's like a really empowering thing to make things better. And by usually working on docs, I feel like you learn how software works a lot better. So it's like a good gateway into working on other open source tasks. Another one, it's like really basic one that I feel like most maintainers are always up for, is like boosting test coverage. And that can be another good way as an entry point to get into learning about a library, especially if it's lower level and it has a lot of stuff going on. And really the way you do that is you just go through the steps of like running the repository locally, and then you just run the test suite in coverage mode, and then you look at the results of that test run to see like, where can you improve coverage, which like is a really good way to learn about the code base, because then you can see like, you can take small bits of code, which like you're going to just boost the coverage by like a few lines, and then you learn about that. And then you can sort of like go from there and just follow up and look at all these different places where things can be made a little better. And this is also a super valuable item. Another really good way to get involved that's not necessarily a code thing is GitHub discussions and Discord. We use both of them. Like helping people out, answering questions is really valuable because it forces you to like sort of think about like your knowledge a little bit more, and it causes you to like learn how things work a little bit better. And then of course, like I mentioned, good first issues. I guess like if you're interested in contributing, how would you go about it? As like an example, I think what works really well is like, just figure out what you're interested in. If you're not like interested in something, it's like, at least for me, it's really hard to like force yourself to do it. And it just comes so much more naturally when it's like, you have that passion for like working on something. And then it just like makes it a lot more fun to work on it. When you encounter challenges, it makes it a lot easier to like overcome those. And then it's like you're sort of invested in the whole process. So, whatever the outcome is, it's positive. And so usually what this means for us is like read the contributing guide, get the local environment set up. Another really valuable thing is like as you go through the contributing guide, because that's like a living, breathing document, feel free to submit a pull request to update it if something didn't make sense, or you had difficulty like getting things set up. It's like totally natural that could happen. It's like tough to like get started with open source project because they're all different. And so I wouldn't feel discouraged if you try to do a contributing guide and it doesn't work. You're welcome to ask a question or update it with something that you ran into and how to fix it so other people can benefit. Generally for like new features or anything major, it's a good idea to like either create a new GitHub discussion or Discord thread, just to sort of like give a heads up of what you're like going to work on. That way it's like, Jake and I have knowledge of like what other people are working on or like what we're working on. And so like, we can suggest that either like you merge efforts or focus on a specific thing, or not to like work on that because someone else is working on that and you're going to duplicate your efforts, stuff like that. Those are probably like the three most important steps. It's like before you have really even started writing any code, it's just like figure out what you're interested in doing, make sure you're able to do it, so get things set up locally, and then sort of just like tell people about what you're interested in working on. And just as like things work, I wouldn't feel bad at all about saying like, I'm interested in working on this thing, like just to let people know. And then if you don't do it, it's not the end of the world. You can come back to it at a later time if you're busy. I wouldn't feel like beholden to like working on something, or feeling like just because you created a GitHub discussion or a new code in Discord, feeling like you were tied to it. If you're more interested in something else, if something comes up, you can just communicate back saying like, I started working on this, maybe share some of your findings, but then say that, you're not going to do it anymore, or you're going to take a break from it for a while. That's totally fine. It's like important to work in a sustainable way. So when you want to write some code, I think it's good to sketch things out at like a high level. One really valuable thing is to just go look at other people's contributions and like what they've done, what has been successful in the past. So basically all you have to do is go to one of the repositories, open up the pull request, and then look at the closed ones. Like this is such a wealth of information basically on any open source repository that has traction, that's been around for a while. Like VM here has 989 closed. A decent number of those are from the core team, like me and Jake, but then there's some from just outside contributors, and like they all come with varying shapes and sizes. Like some of them are docs, some of them are just like basic ones like adding chain definitions. Yeah, so, and you know, some of them are adding new features. It's really all about just like, you know, you can go in and sort of see like how people were successful before, like what they did. And similar for WAGMI, there's like quite a few here as well. Yeah, that's like a really valuable way to sort of like get started. It also allows you to sort of see like how do maintainers communicate with each other? How do like contributors communicate with each other? Like what type of, yeah, like what type, you know, how do people write their code here? How do they structure their pull requests? What type of pull request descriptions do they write? Just sort of like get the vibe of the project and what has been successful before. And so usually, you know, when I work on features, or I think what works well when other people contribute is it works well when you like sort of stub out what you want to do. Like what, you know, you could write some like functions with like the input types and like the output type, and that's sort of like, you know, define like the API that you're working on, and don't really worry about like, you know, the implementation quite yet. And then, yeah, you just like create an early pull request with that, or that's like the grounding point for the rest of your work. Adding failing test cases really works well, especially for libraries like VM, which are all just about like business logic. Another thing that we try to do is like doc-driven development. So like, especially for like public APIs that people like would use, write the doc. We'll write the doc before like writing some code, which allows you to iterate really quickly on like API design and stuff like that. Yeah, and then creating a draft pull request with a quick overview. I think like, you know, I was this way when I first started contributing to open source. Is like I wanted to only create my pull request when it was final and perfect, and it was, you know, ready to be reviewed and like merged in if it was good. But I think it's really valuable to like do something early on in the process, like create a draft pull request early on, and then, you know, sort of work in public like that. Then that allows like other people to sort of, you know, like the maintainers of the project, like me, to sort of like give pointers or maybe help out with stuff ahead of time. And then, you know, it also kind of reduces the risk a bit of like you spend all this time working on something in isolation, and you create a pull request, and then it's, you know, no longer valid because there's been some other changes or whatever that went on. So yeah, I think it's like if you're interested in contributing to NR repositories, these are some things that like might be interesting in each. Like for WAGMI, contributing there is like, you know, you're building at the intersection of Ethereum and app development. Like lots of developers use WAGMI, and what they're doing is they're like, you know, adding an Ethereum component to their app, whether it's something like ENS, registering a domain name, or like Gitcoin, like being able to back around, like, or like, you know, a bridging interface, or even other stuff like, you know, signing messages on like one of the Farcaster clients, or like buying NFTs or stuff like that. That's sort of like what WAGMI's base is there. VM's like lower level, so it's mostly just like plain JavaScript functions that do like lower level crypto things, like signing transactions, sending transactions, reading blockchain data, stuff like that. VM also has some interesting like TypeScript, like more advanced TypeScript types too. But yeah, if you really want to jump into like the advanced TypeScript types and like developer experience of like inferring values and stuff like that, ABI type's another interesting place to go. Yeah, those are some like, if you're interested in any of those things, then those are the repositories that you contribute to for those. Yeah, I guess some other stuff is like we generally try to keep our repositories really clean and tidy. Like if you just like look at them, like, for example, Wagner here is like 4 issues, 6 pull requests. VM is like 3 and 7. Like, these are pretty big projects used by lots of people, and like, there's a lot of inbound issues and pull requests like every week, but we think it's important to like triage stuff and make sure that it's not like chaos. So that way it's like, if people want to contribute, like issues have been labeled and are relevant, they come attached with like a minimal reproducible example. So you don't have to waste your time as like a contributor trying to like figure out, does this bug even exist? Pull requests, usually we try to like review them and merge them in quickly, so that way like we're respectful of people are contributing their time, and stuff just doesn't become stale. Because I think it's one of the biggest, one of the like a large issue in open source is like you have people that are interested in contributing, they contribute, and then they don't have a good experience because it's slow to get something merged in, or they don't get it merged in, and now they are less interested in open source because that was a negative experience. I think even just like another thing, like it's really useful when people give feedback about stuff. Repo structure, code structure, like documentation, really anything. Like it's pretty empowering. Like you can sort of just like, at least for us, like we're open to whatever. Like if you think something is bad or could be better, like let us know. And I feel like most open source projects like that type of feedback. It has to be done in like a respectful way. But yeah, we're just trying to make stuff better, working on the internet, and we really care about people using our stuff. So if you have feedback, it's like useful to let us know. And I think the other key thing is like you can just learn so much about how open source projects operate and stuff like that by just like going on GitHub. Some people have different policies than us. Like, we like to keep our issue number down, which means that usually we close issues that don't have minimal reproducible examples, minimal reproductions, and like, we will add a label to them. And then, that sort of puts the ball back in like the issue reporters or issue creators court to sort of like enrich it with some more info so it can be worked on. But some projects don't do that. Some projects leave everything open. Some projects have feature requests that are in issues. We usually try to keep the feature requests in discussion under a label. It's just useful to see, like, if you're interested in contributing open source, just like spend some time getting a pulse and vibe on the project. Like, who is contributing, like who are the maintainers, just like kind of like looking at like, you'll see like the same like GitHub usernames and avatars around, which are useful. And then I think it's usually really valuable when people are responsive. It's like if you create a pull request and we ask you some questions or do a review, if you're able to like respond quickly, then it's like we will also respond quickly and we'll make sure that it gets merged in like really quickly. Lastly, I feel like any effort is positive. Like I feel like when I started contributing open source, the first few, at least like the first couple pull requests and stuff I worked on didn't get merged in at all, which like was a bummer, but it got me still like interested in working on stuff in public with people. And at the end of the day, like you learn a lot too by contributing, like setting up the repository, like learning how to navigate the code base, learning how to communicate with other developers and stuff remotely. So even if it doesn't get merged in, like, you learned a lot from that journey. And so like the next time you contribute, you'll be in like really good shape there too. That's sort of all I had. If anyone has any questions, here are some places you can go. If anyone wants to contribute, you're welcome to DM me on Twitter, or open up a GitHub discussion or Discord thread in any of these places, and I'm like more than happy to help out. And like I it can definitely be very, very intimidating to start contributing open source. Like I remember when I was first contributing, I was like, scared that these maintainers were going to be upset, that I was going to do something wrong, that I was going to make a fool out of myself in public. But, you know, I think ultimately it's like, if you have like some good intention, you're just interested in learning and doing your job, like, you know, those things might happen, but like for our project, like we will work with you, like we'll make sure it is like as easy and respectful as possible. Yeah, that's sort of it. Happy to answer any questions about any of this stuff or yeah, anything else.
Amazing, thank you. Really great tips in general, not just from the projects that you're working on, but just in general on how to contribute to open source, figuring out what you're interested in, and also definitely interesting to hear about your own experience and helping people with their open source journey. So very much appreciated. A lot of great tips in here. I think you guys, you mentioned a lot of these things. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say no problem. I think, you know, it's really inspiring to see like there's like multiple people over this open source journey, like when we've been working on our projects, that like they'll do some small pull requests and then like a few months later they'll do a bigger pull request, and then like a month later they'll do another pull request, and then, you know, it just sort of like builds from there. You can just tell they're growing in confidence, their skill level is growing, you know, their understanding of our specific code base is growing. So yeah, it's really valuable if you can spend the time.
Exactly, yeah, and that's a lot of it is what we're trying to achieve with this program as well. The 30 days challenge, it's just to help people make that first contribution. A little bit of mentoring, a little bit of hand-holding, getting people excited, but definitely just making that first PR and getting it merged. That's definitely the first step to hopefully bigger things and make people more comfortable to contribute to other projects as well. And again, lots of great tips that you shared here. Super helpful. Let's see if we have any questions. Yeah, your Twitter handle, you shared it already, awkweb on Twitter. Definitely follow him. And JXCom, how do you say that? Your partner, what you're working on. Both are great follows if you're...
I don't think I've ever said it aloud before, but yeah, that's Jake. And
Jake, yeah.
I can share his Twitter as well. Yeah, I mean, it's wild. Like, I think other like just to like sort of illustrate like how crazy the open source journey is. Like, I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and Jake is in Australia. Like, I started working on WAGMI by myself, and then like, you know, Jake randomly created a GitHub discussion about like how to improve things, and then like we worked on that together, and yeah, like we had never met in person. We'd been working together for like a year and a half, and we finally met in person at like the end of November. But yeah, it's wild. Like open source allows you to bump into people, like really smart, awesome people that, you know, you never would have been able to before. So yeah, I guess it's just the internet, you know.
That's true. Yeah, lots of exciting things can happen if you put a little bit of effort into it. Yeah, we shared some of these tips as well in our kickoff, and I think you mentioned all of basically some of these things as well. Open source is open source in general is community, but one open source project is a community as well. So if you find your way in there, there's definitely a lot of very useful things that can come out of that. So thanks again. Maybe since there are no other questions, I think maybe adding, I think you guys are also an amazing example of being a true open source and public good project. You guys have been doing great in the retroactive public goods funding rounds as well. And something that was really amazed to see is that you're planning to, or maybe you've done that already, but to share some of those rewards coming from these grant programs downstream as well with the dependencies, which you're basically all relying on. And that's, I think it's really another example of true open source public good projects that are just helping the entire ecosystem, the open source ecosystem, and help us all thrive and grow further. Anything you want to add to that, or anything you want to share there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think like we try to be like good open source citizens, and like, you know, this is the first time we're doing most of this stuff, and so like we're always down for feedback on how to improve things. But generally, it's like we want to make sure that like maintainers supported, we're supporting our dependencies. One thing that like we don't publicize at all, like we've paid a bunch of maintainers that have contributed, you know, more so like pull requests that like have taken them a while and have been larger. You know, we've paid anywhere between like, I don't know, $500, $2,000, $5,000, just to, like random people that have contributed, and have like done valuable stuff. So that's not like a guarantee if you contribute to one of our projects, but often if it's like you add valuable things, like we make sure you get compensated for your time and effort. And we'd love to do more of it too, and have it sort of be like an automatic thing. And that's where we're starting to go with like, you know, some of the stuff around. There's this product called Drips, which allows you to like just automatically send downstream funds to dependencies and like folks. So yeah, we just want to make sure that it's easy for people and they're getting something out of it too.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I was referring to the Drips project. Indeed, that's really cool to see. But good to know that you're also compensating individual contributions. So if you are considering to contribute to wiping your VM, this might be another small incentive, I guess.
Yeah, one last thing is like it's tough because it's like it'd be great to be able to do that for everyone, and then also make it publicly known too, because not everyone can like spend time on open source unless, you know, they're getting something out of it. Like just because they don't have time and they like need to spend that like, you know, resting or like making like money to work on stuff. So it'd be good if we could like make that public. One thing we're just concerned about is like getting spammed with like lots of people doing low effort stuff, which is an unfortunate side effect of the internet there. But yeah, if anyone here like is interested, feel free to DM me. I might not respond immediately, but I will respond, and like I'm happy to like point you in the right direction or like answer some questions. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool, amazing, thanks. I think we're gonna wrap things up here then. I see no other questions coming in, so we're gonna switch our sessions here and invite Boydu to the stage. I'll go share this Twitter already and his other contact info. If you have